Good evening. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Leo Baeck Institute and to the Center for Jewish History. My name is Billy Weitzer. I'm the Executive Director of the Leo Baeck Institute. The Leo Baeck Institute, for those of you who don't know us, was founded in 1955. Our mission is to preserve and promote the history and culture of German-speaking Jewry. As such, this program fits perfectly within our mission. We're very excited to screen The City Without Jews. It's an excellent example of how our mission lives out through our programming. The film, based on a prescient novel about events to come a decade later, is an important lesson in history from which there's much to learn. A couple of introductions. We are very pleased to have Donald Sosin to play the piano for our silent film, and this is something I don't usually tell where people graduate from, but he graduated from the University of Michigan, which we like, and Columbia University. He is played very widely the music for silent films. And my understanding is that he and Alicia Spiegels, his partner in klezmer, will be recording what he's written for this film, and it will be eventually attached to the film. So when the film is distributed more broadly, it will be attached to it. I told him that I would also say that he and Alicia Spiegels will be performing the Ancient Law at Town and Village Synagogue, which is on 14th Street, right? On April 18th. So you could Google that and find that. And we're also very appreciative that the Sunrise Foundation for Education and the Arts has supported his performance tonight. So we're very much looking forward to that. I also want to introduce Noah Isenberg, who is the newly appointed George Christian Centennial Professor and Chair of the Department of Radio, Television, and Film at the Moody College of Communications, University of Texas, Austin. Whew. Okay, take a breath. Does that all fit on your card? Many of you will know him from his previous 15 years here in the neighborhood at the New School and his involvement with many programs at LBI and the Center for Jewish History. Before he taught at the New School, Noah was at Wesleyan University, where I had the pleasure of working with him. Beyond his role as a teacher and scholar, Noah is a literary and cultural critic with a wide and deep knowledge of German and Austrian literature and cinema. I really want to thank Noah for taking the time during this busy transitional time in his career to introduce The City Without Jews, and after the film, he will take questions. I also want to recognize Juliana Camfield from the Deutsches Haus at NYU, and it's from her and the German Academic Exchange Service that we were able to help support Noah's presence tonight. So Noah's going to speak briefly, we'll see the film, questions and answers, and then a reception. Thank you.
So, good evening. Thank you, Billy, for those kind introductory remarks. Thank you to David Brown. Thank you to Juliana Camfield. Thank you to all of you who are filling out this auditorium on a glorious spring evening. I'm going to speak initially extemporaneously, and then a minor correction to what Billy said, not the ridiculously long title. That came with the position. I can't correct that. But the brief. I will try to be as brief as possible, but I'm going to draw. Can you hear me? I saw a hand go up. I wasn't sure whether you already had questions. We're going to wait till after the screening for that. I wrote a rather long catalog essay to accompany the release of this film for the Austrian Film Archive, and I'm not going to read that in its entirety, but when we get to the film section, there are a lot of details, and I think it would be helpful to have that background, so if you'll just bear with me. About a century ago, in Vienna, there was a writer by the name of Hugo Bettauer. He was born Maximilian Hugo Bettauer on the outskirts of Vienna in Baden by Wien, and he was born there in 1872. He was raised in the city's first district, went to primary and secondary school there at the Franz Josef Gymnasium. His classmate was none other than Karl Kraus, the very famous writer, critic, journalist of the turn of the century, someone who was known for a very, very sharp tongue. But late in life, when Hugo Bettauer's reputation was besmirched, it was none other than Karl Kraus who really came to his defense. Bettauer lived here in New York City on a number of occasions, and he wrote mainly for the emigre press, German and German Jewish press here in New York, in addition to filing dispatches for the publications back home in Vienna and then later in Berlin, Hamburg, and elsewhere. He churned out novels at a breakneck pace. In many years, it was as many as half a dozen per year. The year in which he wrote Die Stadt ohne Juden, The City Without Jews, that's the source novel that Hans-Karl Breslauer, the director, adapted to the film we're about to see. In that very year, there were 5 additional novels that he published. So he was quick. And the kind of work that he was known was sometimes disparagingly referred to as trivial literatur. That's trivial, as you can imagine. I don't need to translate that one for you. And then later, as in a decade or so later, sometimes it was pinned under the even more disparaging banner of Asphalt Literatur, so street or urban literature, which was very much associated with Jews. So I wanted to give you just that little bit, that sort of thumbnail sketch of Hugo Bettauer and his source novel. In the first year alone, just to give you an idea, the first year of publication, it sold 250,000 copies. As a critic by the name of Julian Sternberg wrote, he addressed something that he called das Thema des Tages, the theme or topic of the days. He had the gall, the chutzpah, you might say, to wrestle with anti-Semitism. And Bettauer said, and this was in a piece that was timed for the publication of the novel, a profile that ran in one of Vienna's leading newspapers, he said that he came upon the idea by walking in a certain district of Vienna and seeing all these placards posted that had the slogan, Hinaus mit den Juden, banish the Jews, out with the Jews. And he thought about that, and he began to fantasize, well, what would actually happen if the city lost its Jewish population? And that essentially was the impetus for the source novel. So I'm going to read now from a script. It won't take me terribly long. I planned it so it'll be about maybe 10 minutes maximum. After we have the screening with Donald Sossen's piano accompaniment, there will be a chance for further questions. But I'm hoping that this will stimulate some thought and give you just a bit of background about what went into this production. So bear with me, if you will, for a moment. Just 1 year after the book's publication, so that would be 1923. The book came out in 22. And 2 years before its author's assassination, and I can go into that when we have the Q&A if you like. So Bettauer was killed at the hands of a proto-fascist thug who stormed into his office during office hours and shot him dead, unloaded a Luger with 5 bullets straight to the chest. Hans-Karl Breslauer purchased the film rights for his company, HKB Film. A native of Vienna whose father ran a local coffee house, Breslauer had directed more than a dozen films, mainly for the Austrian production companies Sascha Filmindustrie and Mondial Film, by the time he acquired the rights to Bettauer's novel. Having started out as a theater actor, he had already written a handful of screenplays and performed on stage and on screen in numerous productions in Germany and Austria. In the early years of the First Republic, Breslauer is included in the Almanach der Film- und Kinoindustrie, the Almanac of Film and Movie House Industry, listed in 1919-1920 as vice president of the Club of Austrian Film Directors. The Hungarian-born Jewish screenwriter, Ida Jenbach, born Jakobowitz, who would co-write with Breslauer the screenplay for The City Without Jews and collaborate with him on 5 other films in the first half of the 1920s, is the only woman listed in the Almanach as belonging to the same Austrian club. Like her collaborator, she began her career as a theater actress and gradually made her way to the cinema in the teens and 20s. Given the explosive content of Breslauer's novel, and I didn't go into all the details, but you're going to see them on screen. I try to avoid any spoilers. But just wrestling with anti-Semitism, that alone was incendiary, or at least could be considered incendiary. The first matter of business for the screenwriters was to tamp things down to avoid any serious threat of censorship or political fallout. Most significantly, perhaps, the city in which the action takes place would no longer be referred to as Vienna, in Breslauer and Jenbach's rendition, but rather the Republic of Utopia, a conveniently vague locale less apt to cause domestic political reverberations. The initial plan, then, was not so much to undo Bettauer's message of tolerance and mutual understanding, as it was to make a movie that is most palatable to a mass audience. Thus, the love story between Lotte and Leo, and we'll see that on screen in just a second, plays a greater role in the screenplay than in the novel, and the more identifiably Viennese characters of the novel became more general figures amid the cinematic landscape. Likewise, a number of crowd scenes requiring scores of extras, anti-Jewish street demonstrations, praying Jews, throngs of Jews leaving the city, I'm just giving you a few examples of those scenes, used in the credit sequence and at several junctures in the filmic exposition, are written into the screenplay. Breslauer and Jenbach also added several set pieces, some of them to convey additional facets of the cultural milieu, others for a stylistic flourish or merely for comic relief. And you'll see some of that in a bit as well. Since it was not possible to shoot all the scenes on location, set designer Julius von Borsodi, a native of Vienna and one of the top film architects of the silent era, faced the difficult task of creating a number of interior and exterior sets, the Parliament building, the synagogue, among others. Breslauer insisted on adding a prologue filmed inside of the synagogue, which is nowhere to be found in Bettauer's novel. The scene, explains Bettauer scholar Murray Hall, is to introduce to the anti-Semite in the audience a religion that is otherwise entirely alien to him, and in so doing, to change his mind. Those are the words of Bettauer scholar Murray Hall. Given the rather jarring, stilted quality of the filmed scene, shot inside a shadow-laden and somewhat ominous-looking temple built by Borsodi, it likely proved a difficult task to win over anti-Semites. And you'll see there are all sorts of expressionist flourishes in this film, and this is known as one of the most memorable of Austria's contribution to expressionist cinema. In a number of important ways, the film hews closely to the source novel. After the prologue by Breslauer, we return to Bettauer's opening scene on the floors of the Viennese, here it's Utopia, of course, but the Viennese parliament, where the chancellor will soon hatch his plan for Jewish expulsion. Hence the title, of course, City Without Jews. Laborers storm in to announce that the Jews are taking their jobs away, the street marches continue, and inflammatory debates take place in local taverns. Breslauer uses the interior of a tavern as a means of introducing his principal characters. Councillor Vollbart, who's played by Ferdinand Meyerhofer, an anti-Semite whose daughter is married to a Jew, and Councillor Bernhard, who's played by Hans Moser, who became in the post-war period one of Austria's most beloved actors, and who, with a bit of dark irony at the time, was married to a Jewish woman and managed to hide his wife during the war years, perhaps owing to his prominence on stage and screen. So that's Hans Moser, who plays Councillor Bernhard, another anti-Semite, who will ultimately make an unwitting change of faith in the final reel. And we'll see that. That's the most expressionistic scene in the picture, and I'm happy to speak about that in more length afterwards. Leo Strakash, and that's Leo of Leo and Lotte, who's played by Johannes Riemann, and Lotte, who's played by Anna Miletti, a standby muse of the director, Hans-Karl Breslauer, whom he would marry a year later. She's the one who plays Lotte in this film. Let me just move on as briskly as I can. When the film isn't busy lavishing its attention on the threatened romance between Leo and Lotte, and again, this is an interfaith romance, we mustn't forget, and I think you'll have abundant clues on screen to that effect. Breslauer includes a number of set pieces co-written with Jenbach, in which the audience has the chance to be in on the sly jokes about the Jews on screen, and on occasion, about the Jewish actors pretending not to be Jews at all. Early in the film, for example, there's a scene with Kathi, who's played by Gisela Verbezirk, a renowned cabaret actress from the Viennese theater scene, known for her frequent portrayal of a Yiddish mame in theater and then here also on screen, the cook at the Counselor Folbart's home, and her Jewish lover, Isidor, who's played by Armin Berg, who was born Hermann Weinberger, likewise a Jewish cabaret actor from the Viennese scene, in which their gestural humor is almost akin to American Borscht Belt shtick, played for laughs to a knowing audience. They pinch each other's plump cheeks between kisses, and Isidore plants a bold slap on Kathy's behind. This was acceptable at that time, in 1924. The biggest laughs, however, may come from those who easily recognize the Jewish actress Verbezirk trying to pass as a Gentile cook, and yet who is still thoroughly coded as Jewish. Her irrepressible Yiddishkeit can't be contained in such scenes as when Kathi lovingly feeds Isidore an ample plate of leftovers in the kitchen, weeping at his imminent departure, dramatically threatening to stab herself with a carving knife. This is almost out of the biopic on Lenny Bruce, and you'll see. We can speak at greater length afterwards. But with the carving knife, and finally offering to accompany him to the promised land. In a similar vein, she arrives at a train station to see him off with an armful of sausages, as if sending her boy chick to summer camp, and asking for a postcard from Zion. For his part, Isidore is later shown in the Holy Land in front of a kosher butcher, kosher written in Hebrew script, with the German Filiale Zion, so the Zion branch, beneath it, gnawing on a piece of matzah and playing cards with a couple of local bearded fellows while wearing a starched European suit and looking altogether out of place in the desert, much like the German-speaking Jews, or Yekes, in Palestine were perceived. Just a bit more. Just a bit more. During the years leading up to the Breslauer adaptation of Bettauer's novel, there was a brief wave of Jewish-themed silent pictures made in Vienna. In his indispensable study of Yiddish cinema, Bridge of Light, critic Jim Hoberman, who's been a frequent guest here at the Leo Baeck Institute and at the Center for Jewish History, notes, for instance, how the Ukrainian-born American actor and director from the Yiddish stage and screen, Sidney Golden, established a company, Golden Film, in Vienna in 1921. Among the films that Golden directed was Ost und West, East and West, from 23, a six-reel comedy featuring the immensely popular Yiddish stage actress Molly Picon, playing alongside Laura Glücksmann, who enjoys a small part, a cameo, as a saleswoman in Breslauer's film that we're about to see tonight. A number of other actors from the wider Yiddish theater and cabaret scene make appearances in Die Stadt ohne Juden, in The City Without Jews, including Salcha Weinberg, who has a cameo as an angry customer, and like Verbezirk, whom I mentioned before, who plays Kathi, the Gentile cook. She too is playing a Gentile here at this fashion boutique of Biskuit and Bruda after a post-expulsion conversion to selling only Alpine garb. So after the Jews are expelled, you can only sell Tracht, the Alpine garb. The Galician-born dramatist Abish Maesels makes an even briefer cameo as a bearded Hasid facing expulsion, while the actor and former member of the Budapest Orpheum Society, a Jewish cabaret troupe, Siggy Hoffa is on screen for a couple of early scenes as a barman at a local tavern. I just want to give you a little background, a little color on all the different types of people who made appearances in this film. You ready? Good. Because the Jews in Vienna in the 1920s were by and large so thoroughly assimilated and in many instances virtually indistinguishable from their Gentile counterparts, the Ostjuden, or East European Jews, with their unreformed appearance and seemingly exotic and otherworldly practices, became more easily identifiable representations of Jewishness in the visual arts at this very time. This was no truer than in the cinema, where films of the 1920s often used Eastern Jews or actual extras taken from the city streets, or as in the case of this film, The City Without Jews, actors made up and dressed in ethnic garb as the stand-in for all Jews. And I'm going to I'll let you sort that one yourself. I want us to get to the picture. I want to just say, enjoy the show, but I'll speak with you afterwards. You may have questions. There's a lot more to unpack, I tell you. Enjoy the show, and Donald Sosin, I look forward to it.